Hello, and welcome to this Mirror Facebook Live on the cost of living and everything you need to know about the £150 council tax rebate. I'm Sam Barker, a reporter here at the Mirror. I'm very grateful today to be joined by an amazing expert on this and many other subjects, consumer champion Martin James from complaints handling organisation Resolver. Hello, Martin.
Hello, Sam. Thanks for having me back on.
No, pleasure. Thank you. Now, today we're going to be talking about council tax rebates, specifically the £150, which around 80% of UK households will be getting around about this time, hopefully. And we're going to be going into some of the sort of nitty gritty around this. So we're going to be covering what this is, why you're getting it, what to do if you haven't got it, and also a worrying scam around this that you should be aware of. Now, we're going to be answering throughout the call a lot of the common questions that we've been asked about this issue. But to everyone who's tuned in, please do feel free to ask any questions. We'll do our level best to answer them throughout the call, and then we'll hopefully have a bit of time at the end and we'll go back into it. Because we get an awful lot of emails from readers about this subject, and I know there's a lot of people for whom this isn't really working perhaps as smoothly as it should be. So hopefully we'll be able to sort of give what advice we can. So to kick things off, I'll quickly explain what this rebate is, and then we can get into some of the details. So the government is giving all households in council tax bands A to D a one-off £150 rebate to help with the cost of energy bills. The payment is being made through the council tax system because it already exists. So it's quick and it's easy, and the government doesn't need to set up a whole new system and administer a whole new system. So that's why it's coming through the form of money off your council tax. But the way that this works, it is a little bit tricky. It's a little bit bitty. There are a few loopholes to be aware of, and even some risks. So, Martin, to kick things off, roughly when will people be expecting to receive it? I know we've had ours today, but our neighbours upstairs and downstairs haven't had theirs yet. Roughly when are people supposed to be getting this £150, please?
Well, that is the big question at the moment. And to say that, we've heard of thousands of inquiries about this is something of an understatement. It's really weird because when it comes to things like rebates, little tiny words can make a huge difference. So when the Chancellor announced that this £150 was going to be paid, we all assumed, and indeed actually heard, that would be applied in the council tax period in April. But actually the words that the Chancellor used, annoyingly, is from April, which is a small word, but it makes a big old difference because lots of people are expecting to see that money straight away. And of course, it's not materialised. Now, just to kind of set the scene a bit, because we've got to deal with the 4 countries of the United Kingdom, there are slightly different rules for England, Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. And then on top of that, within those countries, the way that the councils actually allocate this money also varies as well. So we can really say this is a postcode lottery, and that's caused a huge amount of confusion and frustration for people. So I really do understand that. There are a number of kind of ways that the money is going to be paid to you. But just to kind of clarify one of the big urban myths here as well, this isn't a deduction off your council tax bill. So it's not like you're going to get 150 quid knocked off. This is actually paid back to you by using your bank account details. So if you're paying, by direct debit, then you'll get the £150 paid to you. It's not a knockoff off the bill. But of course, there are many, many things that can go wrong with that, as I'm sure you've heard, Sam.
We certainly have. And so basically, if you haven't had the rebate yet and you're, in council tax bands A to D, don't worry. It should be due to you. But there's one of the things which I sort of hoped to come onto was actually, unfortunately, there is a scam now up and running, sort of targeting this area, and I think households really should be aware of this. What have you heard of this scam, please?
Do isn't it really awful as well that whenever kind of there's confusion, fraudsters and scammers and of course opportunists all move into kind of these areas. So there are 2 things to be wary of, just in the same way that we have problems with COVID scammers about getting your injections, and we had issues to do with fake delivery companies and fake fraud attempts on your bank accounts. Scammers are already moving into this territory because they know there's a lot of confusion about what's going on here. Now, the scam basically works in the same way that many of the other ones do, by sending you an email or a text or maybe even a phone call. We're just starting to hear from a few people who are saying that they've been contacted by phone. And basically, they're asked for their details so that the money can actually be paid to them for the rebate. Now, this is quite a simple but very, very seductive form of scam, because if you don't pay by direct debit, then it's possible that your council will contact you, which is really frustrating, because usually we just say to ignore people outright. So what you have to bear in mind is the fact that there will be people who will try and get your bank account details or maybe personal details out of you by saying they're from the council and offering you that rebate. So be cynical is the simple rule of thumb. Don't trust anyone who phones you up out of the blue. Think of anyone who calls you as a stranger. You wouldn't hand over cash to a stranger in the street. So don't hand over your bank details to anyone on the phone. Now, if you aren't paying by direct debit for your council tax, then the council may well actually contact you. We don't know how your local councils are all going to do this. But again, there's nothing wrong with speaking to the person and asking them, or just saying to them, I'm going to call through to the council tax line. Is somebody going to be able to help me there? Don't phone a number that the person on the phone gives to you, by the way, because it'll be the fraudster. You'll just be going straight back into it. If you want to check it's genuine, then contact through your local council website. There's usually a form that you have to fill out anyway, but you should be able to speak to someone there to get some advice. Now, the other thing, just if that wasn't enough, to watch out for is we have opportunistic companies as well. These aren't committing fraud. They operate in a very kind of legal grey area. And you may have seen kind of the reports in the Mirror about companies that offer to get money back from tax refunds, for example, or get you visas for America much quicker, or get your passport quicker. None of these things are actually true. They just charge you a fee for doing something that you could do for free yourselves. And yes, sadly, we are seeing companies that are contacting people and saying that they can help you get your rebate back for a percentage of that fee. And just to add to this as well, we can talk about this later if we've got time. There's been a lot of reports in the press about unclaimed council tax. I think Money Saving Expert estimated that there was £233 million in overpayments sat around since 1991 or 93, waiting to be claimed back. Now, as a result of that, there are also loads of these companies that are moving into that territory as well. So you might also be contacted by a business saying that they can help you claim back your council tax. Don't worry about that. I'm writing a guide for the Mirror right now that we will share with you that will explain how you can do all of that for free.
Perfect. And you should be able to read that on the Mirror website this weekend. And we'll also be sort of taking, I'll give you an email address towards the end of this call. Anyone who's tuning in, any additional questions you don't have time to ask them, or we don't have time to answer them, you can email this and we'll sort of do our best to kind of help you out. And certainly on that scams point, a lot of these, I think there's two broad groups of scammers. Some of them are laughably bad and some of them are extremely professional. And I think that since the pandemic started, the kind of skill involved and the kind of professionalism involved in scamming is kind of ratcheted up. We've certainly come across some very, very convincing ones, and yeah, they can be highly convincing, even to people who think that they will never get caught out. I can't tell you the number of conversations I've had with people where they say, look, this would never normally happen to me, but I was caught, I was on a busy day and I thought everything was fine. They were so convincing and I've lost out. So yeah, please, as Martin says, please do be very, very careful with kind of any calls you may, or communications you might get about this. And actually, it's interesting. I think, from the look of the comments questions we've been getting so far, probably 90% of people have said, I've not had mine yet. So, I think it just goes to show there's an awful lot of people out there asking this question, when am I going to get it? Waiting for that communication. The scammers will use that to their advantage. So yeah, it's definitely worth highlighting that. Now, we've also had a comment from someone saying, I've not had mine because I'm in Band D. So I'm in Band E. And it's a really interesting subject, because obviously this rebate is only being paid out for houses within council band A to D. And I think, a lot of people might look at, there was actually a rumour that the government were working up some sort of scheme to give those additional higher bands this rebate as well. Haven't got very many details on that, and it's certainly not seen the light of day, but it's possible that they did have plans to bring it in and they've canned it. However, I think a lot of people would look at it and go, well, if you're in council band E, for example, surely you're living in a mansion and, you don't need this rebate. That's very much not the case. You can be in a higher council tax band and be very hard up and still desperately need this money. So yeah, I think that's sort of worth highlighting people in that situation. Unfortunately, it looks unlikely that the government are going to bring something in now. Now, one question that we get an awful lot of people asking about, mirror readers, an awful lot are on some sort of state benefit, or they're in a council house, and they say, am I still eligible for this 150 quid if, for example, I get universal credit, or I get the state pension, or I live in a council property? Martin, what's the there's hopefully a bit of good news there.
Well, unfortunately, this is a real grey area, and this is sometimes what happens when, as we've seen over the pandemic, when the government introduce kind of new rules, and then kind of it becomes apparent that there are big gaps in all of this. So, in theory, this isn't a rebate on your council tax. This is £150 to help you get through the cost of living crisis with things like the energy bills. So, in theory, everyone should be entitled to it, because it's, we're all kind of facing those same challenges. Now, just to kind of confuse things, unfortunately, because of the way that this is paid, i.e. kind of linked to your council tax, there are whole grey areas about, for example, houses where you might not be the person paying the rent. So if you're a renter and your landlord is paying the rent, then, how do you get the money? Now, I've been onto Government HQ today and yesterday as well. I'm still waiting for an answer. I will give you this answer as soon as I get it. I've been told that the government's consulting on this because it is something of a grey area. It's not really a grey area. It's just something that they haven't thought through. Mm-hmm. So hopefully we'll have an answer soon. People on benefits are in receipt of all kinds of benefits, and that includes, carers or people who are on reduced payments as well. Some students who might not be paying. There are all kinds of scenarios where you might actually get a reduced council tax bill. You should still get the money, because it's not kind of done by quota or pro rata. That's the word I mean to say. Basically, so if you've got 25% off your council tax bill because you live alone, for example, you shouldn't get 25% knocked off your off the rebate. It's 150 quid. So that should still apply. So even if you're mostly reliant on benefits, that shouldn't have an impact on this. The complexity comes if you're not the one who actually pays the council tax bill themselves. So there are a couple of things to iron out. I will be taking any of the questions that we can't answer, by the way. I will simply get back on to the government and annoy them some more, which is the nature of my role. So feel free to keep them coming, and I will keep pestering the powers that be.
Perfect. And so on that, thank you very much, Martin. And there's a question here from John McCrodden, which I'm going to come on to. But before I do, just on that bit that we were just talking about there, I think so there are a sort of a group of households, houses of multiple occupation, where you've got a lot of isolated kind of dwellings within one property where there's a landlord. Caravan parks, for example, where the council tax, you might pay the council tax for that kind of plot as part of the fee that you pay to the landlord. So there's a lot of properties in this kind of group where they may get something, but it's worth saying, if you're among these kind of group of people and you're currently tuning in, watching this, asking, well, when am I going to get mine? As Martin says, we are still waiting for the answers on that. I think that this was something which the government either hadn't really thought of or didn't have time to think of before they rushed this scheme out. So yeah, if you keep reading the Mirror, reading the press, we will, as soon as we know, we'll kind of let you know on that.
And you asked a question at the top there, which I didn't actually answer properly. I've just realised. So if you're still struggling to find out when you're going to get the money, I've been onto loads of councils. Most of them will put an announcement onto their website explaining when and how you'll actually get the payment. It'll also be through the website that you'll be able to apply if you don't pay by direct debit. Annoyingly, many councils have said don't call them because they can't cope with the volume of calls about it. That's rather annoying. So I've been in touch with a number of councils to encourage them to update their websites as quickly as possible. And again, my friends over at Money Saving Expert told me that they've been told by the government departments that councils have up to the 30th of September to pay the money. I've not been able to confirm this. Again, I'm waiting back for a little bit more information. But watch your council website. That's where the information should be going. And if you're not hearing anything, push back.
Perfect. Yeah, wise words, and yes, that's it's definitely worth flagging that up. So we've had a question here from a gentleman, John McCrodden, and he says, well, you've got to pay this £150 back because it's only a loan. So it's worth pointing out. So there's two there's two pots of cash which are coming from the government. Well, actually, technically, there's three to help with cost of living, the biggest bit being energy bills. So the first one is this £150 council tax rebate, which you don't have to pay back. The second one is a £200 energy bill. Well, the government wouldn't call it a loan, but in fact, they get very snippy with us when we do call it a loan. But that's effectively what it is. So that will be given to all households. So basically, what's happening is the government's paying energy companies a big pot of money. They're then passing that on in the form of £200 reduction in your energy bills, but you do have to pay that back. It will be taken out of your energy bills over, well, the exact details are still being hammered out, but it looks like a 5-year period, up to £40 a year. So unfortunately, that bit you do have to pay back. The government were asked by, any charity you can name, we need more targeted support. Pots of money for people who are vulnerable or low income to help them through the cost of living crisis. And this is what they've come up with. So £150 council tax rebate, £200 off your energy bills, but you do have to pay it back. And then there's a third option. So they've also given, interestingly talking about local councils, the government has given a large amount of money to local authorities as a sort of a hardship fund. So if anyone is struggling with the cost of living, one option that's open to you is to go to your local authority and say, these are my circumstances. You will have to fill in some forms. They'll want to know, money, what benefits you're on, things like that. But they will all have a pot of cash to dole out in some form to help people who are struggling, and you won't have to pay that back. Now, we used the expression postcode lottery earlier in this call, and this third one, it really is a postcode lottery because depending on your council, it will depend on what kind of help you get. So some councils will give money. The highest that I've personally heard that a council gave out to a household under that scheme was about £200. Some councils won't give you money; they might give you vouchers. So and you can go spend them in supermarkets and what have you. Three kind of pools of money available. But this £150 council tax rebate that we're talking about today, you don't have to pay it back. And so I also just want to have a quick scan down the sort of list of questions here. Okay, how do you know if you qualify? I think that we've covered that. Perfect. Okay. So one thing I did just want to come back to. So everything that we've spoken about with this rebate, £150, council tax bands A to D. This only applies if you pay your council tax by direct debit. And we briefly covered this off, but I think it is worth coming back onto because if you don't pay by direct debit, it's a little bit more complicated. The reason that the people who pay by direct debit are getting the money quicker is very simple. It's because the council knows your bank details. So, they've got everything they need. It's an awful lot easier to kind of shunt that money across from April onwards. But if you don't pay council tax by direct debit, it's a very different situation. Martin, do you mind sort of talking through, what do we know so far about, if you're not paying this by kind of automated bank transfer, when are you likely to sort of get this, and what are the steps you might have to go through, please?
So once again, as you rightly said, Sam, this comes down to the postcode lottery, and I know this is really frustrating for everybody. It's estimated that around a quarter of people, so we're talking loads of people, 25% of people don't pay their council tax by direct debit. Often they may be more in need, they might require more support as well. And then when you go onto the council website, it can be sometimes quite tricky to find the help that you need. The government have basically said to all of the councils in the 4 countries of the United Kingdom that they have to find ways to actually pay that money to people. So your council should contact you if you're affected. They will still know who you are because there will be a council tax bill. But because of the way that this has all kind of been rolled out, it's really complicated. I think mistakes will happen. So it's important to keep checking as well and find out if you've not heard from the council, then you are, whether they like it or not, you're going to have to call them to find out how the money is going to be paid to you. But they should contact you. Watch out for scammers, and make sure that, you know, when you hand over your bank details to actually get the money paid to you, that you've contacted the council direct. So just be a little bit cautious there. You should get the money though. The only kind of variation on this, you mentioned multiple occupancy homes before as well, Sam. It's the person who pays the bill in a multiple occupancy house who will actually get the money paid back to them. So if you're, say, 5 students, then whoever's bank account the money is going out of, that's the person who'll get the money, and you'll have to divvy it up that way.
Perfect. No, thank you very much. And yeah, it's worth that. It's a great point you make there, is that, you know, even households who are, for example, they don't pay any council tax at all. So for example, a household of 4 students wouldn't pay any council tax at all. There's actually quite a lot of walks of life where you're subject to, for example, if you live by yourself, you get 25% off your council tax. There's other help available for, you know, for example, people who are sort of learning, very severely learning impaired, carers, the elderly, and so on. Even if you're paying a reduced rate of council tax, if you're in council tax bands A to D, you are still eligible for the full £150. You know, the council won't be knocking, or shouldn't be knocking, any money off that. And if they do, please do give us, you know, please do get in contact with us, because we'd certainly be interested in writing about it. Now, there's a really interesting question we've had here from Alison Thackeray. So I hope I'm pronouncing your surname correctly, by the way. You know, what if you don't want it? And, you know, this is something where, you know, this came up an awful lot with this council tax rebate, and it came up a lot with the £200 energy bill loan, not loan, that the government are kind of giving out as well. What if you don't want it? There are a few people who got in contact with us saying, well, look, you know, I happen to be, you know, well off enough. I'd rather that this money went to, you know, the more deserving, or the council spent it on something else. Unfortunately, you know, because this system has got to be administered at such a huge scale, you can't opt out. So, you know, they're going to give you that money. I noticed that one of the other commenters on this, earlier in this session said, I'm going to give it to charity. You know, I think that's definitely, you know, a very strong option. If you feel that, you know, the money could be put to better use elsewhere, that's an option. You know, this time last week we were talking about food banks, and you know, food banks certainly up and down the country are sort of crying out for donations as well. But it's worth talking to them in advance, because it may well be that there's something that they need more than others. For example, you know, a lot of them are kind of swimming in tins of baked beans, but there's a lot of other things which they need. So one, you know, definite sort of strong contender is to you know, sort of pass that money on if you feel you don't need it. Unfortunately, you can't opt out. It's the same with this energy bill loan, not loan. Unfortunately, you know, we are going to have to pay it back. It should be how we think the system is going to work is that it should be pretty simple, and the money would just be kind of tacked onto your bill. Even if you change energy provider, it will all be done automatically. Unfortunately, as I say, very sadly, you can't opt out. So one other thing which I sort of wanted to mention was, well, you know, we're getting this £150 rebate because of the cost of living, and the biggest single cost which most households are grappling with at the moment is energy bills. Now, unfortunately, this £150 combined with the £200 energy loan probably won't make much of a dent in the huge bills which an awful lot of households are now facing. You know, I was talking to a Mirror reader earlier today who said, you know, what on earth do I do? Because, you know, basically I've been driven to, she called them loan sharks. So it's probably worth flagging as well. If you are really, really struggling to pay your bills, the first port of call would be talk to a charity such as Citizens Advice or Step Change if you're in debt. If you're struggling with your mental health as a result of this, there are a whole host of charities available and a lot of resources available on their website. If you are also, you've done that, and you know you are still struggling, and these charities are under a really heavy load at the moment, don't forget that you can contact your energy company and say, I'm having trouble paying my bills. You know, I am kind of running into difficulties here. You know, what can you do to help? Because they don't publicize this very well, but they do have help that they can give you I mean, they'll try and put you onto a kind of payment plan as anyone, you know, in debt might expect, but they can, you know, they do have it within their power to, you know, pause any kind of payments for a certain period of time. And in some very, very rare cases, they have actually written debts off. But I think you have to be in extremely difficult circumstances at the moment for that to apply to you. So yes, it's probably just worth flagging that there's an awful lot of help out there if this £150 rebate and the £200 loan are not enough. So remember, local councils, hardship fund, energy companies, they may be able to help you, but the waiting times to hear back at the moment from energy companies we're hearing are also very, very high, because as you might expect, they're really snowed under with the number of people who are kind of running into difficulties. So just going to have a very quick list. Thank you so much everybody for commenting. I'd be really interested in your views on whether or not you think this is enough, and any other thoughts you might have. I really appreciate all the feedback. There's actually so many that it's sort of very difficult to sort of scan through them all. So Michael Hall says, I've heard people saying that some people won't get their £150 until September, not April. Durham County Council has no government guidance. When can they pay it out? So Martin did sort of mention this earlier in the call. Definitely worth repeating that this £150 is coming from April. So it may well be that Durham won't get around to doing it until September. Even within one area, for example, my flat here, we've had the payment, but my neighbours on either side of me haven't, for example. So I think even within one area, one postcode, one council, you're going to get these discrepancies. And if you haven't got it just yet, don't panic. It probably is coming to you. But that September one, the fact that Durham County Council have pinned their colours to the mast and said you're getting it in as far back as September is quite surprising. I've not heard that. So Michael Hall, my £150 will be wiped out as my warm home discount was declined. I'm very sorry to hear that, Michael. And very sadly, there are an awful lot of households who are in the same boat. The government obviously have decided to press ahead. I'm not saying this applies to you, but the government have pressed ahead with plans to exclude about 300,000 disabled benefits claimants from the warm home discount for this winter coming. So the warm home discount, for anybody who doesn't know, is a payment made in all years to help eligible claimants with the cost of their heating bills. It's particularly drawn upon by the elderly, but there are a whole group of people who can claim it, and unfortunately, there'll be a few fewer by the time this winter rolls around. So thank you everybody for commenting. As I'm just sort of scanning through.
Well, just while you're scanning, Sam, anyone else who's affected, we mentioned briefly the Household Support Fund, which is that additional, it's up to £1 billion has been offered to various councils that they're doling out. So if it looks like you're not going to get the council tax rebate for quite some time, go onto your local council website and type in Household Support Fund. We've got a whole guide on the Mirror Online about how this works and how to make a claim. It's free to do it. Even if you don't think you'll be eligible, give it a go. And you may be able to actually get some much needed help right now.
Yeah, it's really worth flagging that. Really, we need to bang that drum as much as possible because an awful lot of people aren't aware of this. In previous years that they sort of haven't, it hasn't been available. The government has doubled the amount of support. So the pot of money that all the councils have went from £500 million to £1 billion. It is there, it's there to help. So, if you are really struggling, please do apply for it. Now, just keeping an eye on the time, it might well be that that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much to everybody for tuning in and for commenting, asking questions. Your views are really appreciated. We've had so many comments during this call, and I think it just goes to show, sort of how important and interesting that this kind of subject is. For anyone who, we haven't got time to get round to your question, or there's something you think of after the call, the Mirror journalists that work on the personal finance desk here, we've got an email that you can send your questions over, thoughts over to. It's mirror.money.saving@mirror.co.uk. So it's a bit complicated. mirror.money.saving@mirror.co.uk. Send stuff over. We'll do our absolute level best. We do read every email. Unfortunately, due to the volume that we get, we sometimes can't answer every single one. But for anybody that's on the call today, we will answer your emails. We run these Facebook Live events every Thursday at 1 p.m. We cover all aspects of the cost of living crisis. We try and sort of take a slightly different angle every week. So please do join us for future ones, which you can find through the Mirror Facebook page. And thank you for your time, Martin. Really, really appreciated. Hopefully that was helpful to everybody. Thank you, and we'll see you next week.